We have sound. So nice to be here tonight. I came all the way from Nairobi, and it's really nice to be here for the book launch in Amsterdam, in my home country. I know that a lot of you kind of had to come through bad weather and cold and flu to get here, so I really appreciate some of the people who are getting ill and still managed to show up. My name is Anne Miltenburg. I'm your host tonight. And I'm really excited to have 3 amazing guest speakers. And we're going to be talking about how we can better sell the change that we want to see to the world here tonight at the Zwijger. And of course, the occasion for that was the launch of my book, Brand the Change, which is really exciting. It's out in Netherlands already a few weeks, but from today on, it's international, so that's really cool. But we wanted to think a little differently about a book launch and not just talk about, what's in chapter 1 and chapter 2, but really do a live event of what the book is. And so we have people here who really walk the talk about what we discuss in the book. And that's really exciting because they all come from Amsterdam, or at least they're based in Amsterdam. So it's kind of a hometown party tonight. So on the right for you is Ariane Klinkenberg from Tony's Chocolonely. I don't think I need to introduce this brand to you. We're very happy to have Arjen here. Then Emer Beamer, who is a serial social entrepreneur and the founder of Designathon Works. And Mariah Mansvelt Beck, the co-founder of Yoni. I don't know if you all know Yoni. Probably the ladies at least do, because you see it on the shelf. A feminine hygiene product. But before they speak, it's a little bit my party, so I get to say something first. And I wanted to talk to you about the context of the book, because it's not just a kind of finished product, but it's a method and a workshop format and a training format that we developed in the course of 3 years. And a lot of different people participated in and helped to make it come alive. And the thinking around it started about 4 or 5 years ago when I started thinking about the things that really matter to me. What we eat, how we dress ourselves, what kind of jobs we create, what kind of trash we produce, how we could better educate our children. And so I started thinking about what I could do in these areas as a professional working in the field of branding. I think traditionally, for instance, design has had a long history of engagement, social engagement, already from Piet Zwart here in the Netherlands. So I started thinking more about what I could contribute. And what I noticed was that we have a lot of problems in the world, but we also have a lot of people working on solutions. And that's amazing. I couldn't actually imagine what I could add to some of the amazing solutions that were being developed. But I did notice that a lot of those initiatives actually aren't sold so well. And they're not sold to a bigger audience. They often, unfortunately, don't get the attention they deserve, and they stay small in a niche. And instead of just thinking about, for instance, vegetarian hamburgers, selling them to vegetarians, we need to think about how many meat eaters we could potentially get to also eat vegetarian. And that requires a really different way of thinking about how do you position something, and how do you present it, and which arguments are you using to sell that hamburger. And not just hamburgers, because that's, of course, a very concrete example, right? But also, if you think about something as abstract, for instance, as, say, ocean conservation. So if you have a proposal for change in ocean conservation, you really need to be convincing not just the environmental activists, but also the policymakers and the fishermen whose lives depend on the ocean. And so you need to be really smart and strategic about how you sell that idea for conservation to the world. And I thought what's really interesting is that the world of branding and the way we think about branding could potentially be a really important tool in doing that. Because the way that we've defined branding is that it's all about directing how other people think and feel about you. And that's something that's really important when you're trying to get support for your ideas for change. And along the way, in the couple of years that I've been working in this field, what you see a lot is that we love working on our solutions for change, and the people that are developing ideas, they're like inventors, they like to work on the content and the concepts. And the next step for that, the actual selling of it, is just not really what you love to do, which I totally relate to. But unfortunately, that's what often makes a huge difference to getting those ideas to be accepted and actually grow in the world. So what I tell people time and time again is that hope is not a brand strategy. So a lot of us come up with this cool idea, and then, I talk to a lot of different entrepreneurs in the world, and they say, yeah, then we're going to launch it, and then people are going to like it, and then we're going to grow. And unfortunately, actually the word viral is often used there, like, oh, it'll go, hopefully it'll go viral, we'll create a video, it'll go viral. It's like, yeah, but for the 0.001% of videos that actually do that, that's great. But for everyone else, we're just going to have to come up with a plan. And we can't just send things into the world and hope that they land well. So I looked at what am I personally really passionate about, and what can I do professionally, and what do I think the world needs? And I came up with this concept of like, okay, what if we train change makers to think more like brand strategists? And in order to develop that idea, I started with this creative question. So, how can I help create a world where a family starting a fair trade lemonade factory in Sierra Leone has access to as much knowledge of branding as a company like Coca-Cola? So, this is a theoretical question. It's not meant for the answering of this particular question, but there's lots of aspects in there that I made this specific because they give a lot of different indications. So, for instance, the word family is important to me because it shows that these are people who are starting something that will have tremendous challenges in a lot of different fields, not just branding. They'll face logistical issues, they'll have to solve HR issues, financial issues, get investment. They probably don't have a whole family of cousins that all have MBAs. The idea of giving access really means that you need to create tools at a certain price point, or knowledge at a certain price point that's accessible, or geographically accessible for people. And we picked Sierra Leone because it's an interesting place in terms of having a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of challenges. And so I thought, if I can, in the next few years, if I can work on creating an answer to this question, we'll hopefully learn a lot, create something that's effective, and have a lot of fun along the way. So once I knew, okay, I'm going to focus on training change makers to think like brand strategists, then you have to start somewhere, right? So I packed my bag and went on the road and did a world tour and visited all these different co-working spaces and incubators and accelerators, and worked with lots of different entrepreneurs and activists to see if the solutions that I was building, if they were helping at all. So the result of that is this kind of 3-year-long prototyping process, and the book is kind of a side product of that process. So I started prototyping what I thought was the first step. So one of the things that if you ask people, what is the thing about branding that's really mystifying, is that there's a model underneath it that seems very mysterious. And so we looked at what makes a strong brand, and that was the model that's underneath it. And so there's a strong core that translates to an identity, and the identity then, combined with the core, translates to all these different experiences. And so we created the brand thinking canvas, and it helps people to define who they are and what they do and why that matters, and then think about who needs to know and how are they going to find out. Because we felt like these were the crucial questions that really help people to define who they are and what they're selling. And so we prototyped it. First stop was here at Think, and I know there's a lot of thinkers in the room. And what's great about prototyping things in public is that you get so much input from all these really, really good people. So we started on this journey of gathering as much input and feedback as we could. So we worked in Ireland with Eski Britton, who's a surfer, an activist, and an environmentalist, and thought about how we could really create a really strong mission for her that would make it much easier for her to get support for her ideas. We worked with Kojit, which is a co-working space in Tunisia. They are really strong in supporting young entrepreneurs who are creating economic opportunities in post-revolution Tunis. And Nairobi, Kenya, where we worked at Amani Institute, which is a school that develops professionals for the social sector. And what's really great is that wherever you go in the world, and I know that it's right now the world is a really scary place, and there's a lot of talk about countries not getting along, arguments, espionage, but once you start traveling and meeting people, you meet a lot of like-minded people and see the amazing things that they're building. And that's definitely made me, from being a pessimist, made me quite an optimist. We were in Jordan. We also did some workshops here at home in the Netherlands. And after about me personally working with about 800 people, we developed this training methodology. So, for example, what we do is we take a group of participants. These can be from an institute or at a co-working space or a team from a particular company. And we help them to build their brand thinking skills and to develop their own brand strategy. So we do that by first looking into what's a brand that you admire. Let's completely pick it apart. What's the core of it? What do they stand for? What are they trying to achieve? What's their big vision? And then how do they translate that to an identity? And then how do they translate that to all these different experiences that people on the outside interact with? And then we look at, well, how do you now create that for yourself? So first of all, creating a really clear story and then making it compelling. So what you see in the changemaker space is that we often really deeply know what the purpose is and what the big picture is, but we're not always as good in presenting what it is actually that we offer and what the value of that is for people. We bring in experts, local experts, who are building change-making companies and who are in the process of creating brands. And what does that mean for them? And that's a really exciting part of the story, because these people opening up their experiences, first of all, helps other people along the way, so the people in the training. But also gives us more input about what are the things that people struggle with when they're building their brand. And then we pitch. We pitch and pitch and pitch until people are able to, kind of metaphorically speaking, if I would wake them up in the middle of the night, they would be able to reproduce to me in about 30 seconds or 1 minute what it is that they do, why that should matter to me, and give me a really, really compelling argument why I should get involved. So as I said, I've worked with about 800 people now. other trainers. I've worked with a few hundred more. And we've learned a lot in that period. Worked in 14 different countries. And that also teaches you a lot about what are different needs in different countries, but also how similar some of those needs are. So obviously you don't want to just walk around in the world as a brand developer and just pretend like everyone needs a brand developer. That would be a little silly. So you have to ask yourself, like, am I creating something that's truly of value to people, that is relevant, and that's actually answering some of their needs? And so the question for us all the time is like, oh, okay, can you train activists and scientists and different people with a different background to actually think like brand strategists? And what's really cool is that I've learned that you can. So whether you're at this really exciting, high-profile accelerator in East Africa, or you're working with a low-income community in Rotterdam-Zuid, people have a talent for this, and they can pick it up as soon as they're catching on to how the model works and how it can help you to get the things that you're trying to achieve. It can be amazing how quick people pick it up. Actually, I'm kind of sometimes a little jealous of how natural that kind of thinking seems to some people. And I would argue, actually, that the only people that I've noticed that don't pick it up so quickly is engineers. I don't know if there's engineers in the room, but that seems to be a little harder, the empathy thing, I think, maybe. So we ask people, like, oh, okay, do you think branding is actually important to your success? And they say, yeah, it is important. So they give it a 4.5 out of 5, which is pretty close to being crucial, I would say. But then they rate their own knowledge much lower. And I would argue maybe it's even a little lower. But it's good to have some confidence in yourself. So we're trying to bridge that gap between the 2.8 and the 4.5. And so talking to all these people over the years, you get to ask, okay, what do you know about branding? What don't you know about branding that you would like to know? But also we get a really good idea of what they don't know that they don't know. And there's a lot of mistakes because the branding process is so hard to grasp and there's so many different elements to it that it's very easy to make avoidable mistakes. And so things like naming or trademarking or digital marketing, they're all in their own an incredible deep field of expertise. So we wanted to think about how we could provide all that information if all you have with people are a few hours to do the training. So we decided to create a toolkit where we would be able to document all that knowledge. And we're very lucky to raise the funds for that. And I know there's a lot of supporters of the crowdfunding campaign here tonight. So this is an extra thank you and you for supporting the toolkit at that time. It did really well. We had digital edition, printed edition, started traveling across the world. And at this point, we basically became this learning company that had several tools and resources that everyone could access regardless of whether they were doing a training with us. And then really interesting things started to happen because we were asked, for instance, to do a workshop at the Ministry of Defense here in the Netherlands because they thought, oh, this brand thinking idea could be really interesting for us to use that to see how, for instance, we could move from being the Ministry of Defense to promoting peace and what that would mean for the kind of people we hire and the kind of materials that we buy and develop. And just when you think you've had the craziest of them all, we get a princess from Saudi Arabia who says, you know, I have a foundation and we help women to position themselves on the job market and be ready for a career. Because as you know, women are allowed more and more freedoms in Saudi Arabia. They're often very highly educated, but they've never been asked to think about where they want to be in the future. So we adapted the canvas to a type of personal branding canvas and prototyped it in Saudi Arabia, which was a really cool experience, and I could have an entire evening about that experience alone. And then in order to kind of train this whole kit and all the things that come with it, we trained 12 trainers over there who are now delivering this training to hundreds of people, which is really cool. And yes, this is actually the room that we were in, but not every room in Saudi Arabia looks like this. It's a little exotic. We were asked to think about how we could help young leaders in Africa and the Middle East to be more convincing when they're presenting their plans for change in their communities and how they could potentially get funding for it and investment. So we created this toolkit for DOT. And you see the lady with the orange scarf here with the big smile. She's here tonight, Januszka. So I developed a branding course for branding experts with Januszka, my colleague. And we trained these people in Sierra Leone. Because if you ask yourself a question and then you go about trying to find an answer to that question, you sometimes get what you actually wished for. So these people are working as branding experts and marketeers in Sierra Leone, and the Freetown Business School is continuing that training program with our content, which was excellent. And more things started to happen along the way. We started a Facebook group for people who were reading and using the tools. And interestingly enough, all these brand people came and showed up in this group. And I was a little confused at first, because these people know this material. But I quickly realized that this is amazing, this is great, because these people are all allies. These are all people with their own expertise, with their own region that they're working in, who have their own audiences. And what could we do if we could actually work together and create this entire army of independent trainers all over the world who use this method in their own practices? So we found these 12 really cool people from the US to Thailand to the Netherlands, and we set up a pilot to train them online to deliver our method in their own world. We have one of the pilot trainers over here, Raquel. And now, after doing that pilot, we're now starting a class 0 in September. So anyway, as you can tell, there's a lot of stuff happening. And then I had this, but we're still trying, we still have this stuff. And it's just kind of like a sausage machine that's churning out, like it's working in the background, it's working great. But, you get to this duh moment. It's like, oh, I'm actually making the same mistake that everyone is making, that I'm always telling them, like, but you need to build a strong brand, and you need to do marketing, and you need to reserve significant amount of time and money to get your stuff out there in the world. And I'm not doing any of that, because I am just like the people I work with. I want to focus on the content and not on selling it. So I was really, really lucky to meet lovely women of BIS Publishers, who then took our self-published toolkit and helped us to release it worldwide as an official publication. So this is the third edition in a way, but kind of reshaped for BIS and completely re-edited. And they are helping us now to find thousands, 10,000, 100,000 of readers all over the world. So that's really amazing. What's in it? This is the kind of book launch part of the evening. It'll be short, I'm sure. So we wanted to make sure that people understand what's the full process of developing a brand. So this is not something you usually find. If you find branding books, it's either super inspirational and it gives you lots of inspiration with examples like Coca-Cola and Apple, but it's just not realistic for someone who has $20, right? And that's often sometimes what we have when we're starting something. So we wanted to make sure that we demystify the branding process, and really break it up step by step. Then we have lots of tools and exercises so that you're helped along the way to develop your own brand blueprint. Then we have some amazing experts who come in and develop some guest essays for us, because I don't know everything. It's a super expansive field. So we have someone who's focused on storytelling and someone who's focused on digital marketing, and they write those stories for us. And last but not least, the case studies, which are really important, and that's what this evening actually in a way is about. So some of the problems that we know that people encounter, for instance, is people tend to launch lots of different brands for different services or products that they're creating, and they're then not able to manage it properly. So they're spreading themselves really thin. So Susanne van Gompel here, she's a Dutch brand strategist working in Mumbai. She wrote a story about brand architecture, which helps you solve that question of, do I create multiple brands? Then we have Marleen Splinter. I don't know if she's here. She is a trademark lawyer who unpacks the process of why you should trademark. And I know that this is something that you don't hear very often, but it can put you out of business if you don't trademark well. And Roshan Paul talks about storytelling. So we have lots of different cases, like Brick from Kenya, and we wanted to feature companies that aren't super well known yet, but have a really relevant story in terms of how they're developing their brand. We have the story of Dr. Ayana Johnson, who's a marine biologist, and she's been super effective in getting her ideas for ocean conservation accepted by policymakers worldwide. And she talks about how she hones her messaging, for instance. And we have Tony Chocolonely, we have Yoni, and we have Designathon Works in the book. So it's my pleasure to invite the three speakers. We're going to start with Mariah, then Emer, then Arjen. We're going to do questions afterwards, so they're going to be sitting here. If you have a question for them, please join our conversation when we get the speakers together. If you want to share it on Twitter, you're very welcome to. Use the hashtag #BrandTheChange, as is indicated on the signs, so that if you're maybe shy or you don't want to forget your question, we can scan for it so we don't lose your question along the way. Any questions so far? No? Okay, cool. Let me see. Oh, where's the book? That's a very good question. It's on the slide so much I forget it. Well, this is the book. BIS is selling it, of course, tonight with a 20% discount. So if you don't have it yet, it's a good deal. There'll be many more commercial messages tonight, so don't worry. So I'd like to invite Mariah as our first speaker.